So if you could turn to your lecture notes, page 17, we will begin today's lecture proper. Now the method of difference is actually a technique for solving a certain particular type of summation question. Now this technique we will usually apply when most of the terms cancel each other out when we find their sum. This has basically one meaning, which is to say that in order for the terms to cancel each other out, we are actually going to need a difference or a subtraction in the terms themselves. So for example, referring to the series that I gave just now, we have a summation of 3 to the power of r minus 3 to the power of r minus 1 for r equals to 15 to 100. So if we substitute different values of r, we will actually observe that most of the terms will cancel each other out. What does this mean? This means that if I were to write out the sum of this series, I know that my first term will be 3 to the power of 15, right? Minus 3 to the power of 14. Sorry, this is my first term. And I will have to add 3 to the power of 16 minus 3 to the power of 15. I have to add 3 to the power of 17 minus 3 to the power of 16. So on and so forth, up till I get to the point of 3 to the power of 100 minus 3 to the power of 99. This will be my last term. Now what do you observe about this? Can you see that I can actually do a cancellation in this case using this cancellation that I'm about to do in blue? What I'm going to have is, I have 3 to the power of 15 minus 3 to the power of 15, and these two terms will cancel each other out. Next, I have 3 to the power of 16 minus 3 to the power of 16, and these two terms will once again cancel each other out. Is this a coincidence? In fact, this is not a coincidence, and this cancellation is happening because of this subtraction sign over here in the general term. Now, it is a little bit difficult to see how the cancellation is going to work when I write it out in a single long row like that. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to show you the proper presentation for working when we are using the method of difference. So instead of writing it in a single column, what we will typically do is to write it out in a block, this way. Okay, so what happens is, this is actually the row for r equals to 15, this will be the row for r equals to 16, this is the row for r equals to 17. And finally, we end when r equals to 100. This presentation is favored by mathematicians because it allows us to easily see the cancellation to do. What we can immediately see is that 3 to the power of 15 will cancel with 3 to the power of 15 this way. 3 to the power of 16 will cancel with negative 3 to the power of 16. And we expect this pattern to continue, cancelling all the way until the last row. So what does this mean? What are the two terms that have not been cancelled out at the end of this whole process? We basically have negative 3 to the power of 14 and 3 to the power of 100. So in conclusion, if I were asked to evaluate this sum, this would be my final answer. And if you just press this in your calculator, you would be able to see that this is the same value that you got in example 6C. So now, what are some of the key points to note to know when we can use the method of difference? I'm going to give you 2 key points basically, and you have to check for this before applying method of difference. Now the first key point, of course, since it is talking about difference, right, we are definitely going to need to have a difference or negative sign, which can also be minus 1, okay, in our general term. When I say term, please recall that I'm talking about the formula in this part. And the next thing is, definitely it must be a summation. So before applying method of difference, check for these two main things first, whether there is a difference and whether there is a summation. And when I say a difference, I also mean that we actually need the two terms that are being subtracted to be similar. They cannot be too different. Alright, in this case 3 to the power of r and 3 to the power of r minus 1, they are very much similar, which is why we are able to do cancellations like this later on. Okay, now in general, method of difference, when you are able to see that you are able to use it, it is actually quite easy to apply. The problem arises when we do not know that we are able to apply it. So let's look at example 8. We are asked to find the sum of 1 over r squared minus 1. Observe straight away that our difference here is trapped in the denominator, alright, and r squared minus 1, these two terms are not similar at all. So offhand, we cannot immediately apply the method of difference in this case. Instead, what we are going to have to do is to use partial fractions to write this 1 over r squared minus 1 as a difference of two similar terms. Now recall that r squared minus 1 can be factorized into r plus 1, r minus 1. So when we do our partial fractions, we are going to have 1 over r squared minus 1 is equals to a over r plus 1 plus b over r minus 1. I'm not going to go through the partial fractions in this case, and I will leave it to you to complete this part on your own. Instead, I'm going to skip and just show you that if we do the partial fractions correctly, this is the new term that we should have. Okay, and because of the half, I learned in one of the earlier properties, this half is a constant. I can pull it out of my summation sigma notation, and basically my sum will look like this. Now this is wonderful, right? Already we have two similar terms with a difference, okay, and we also have a sigma. This fulfills my two criteria, so therefore I can use method of difference to solve this sum. Now once again in method of difference, I am now going to go through one more time the method of difference, and I would like you to pay special attention to the presentation this time round, because method of difference is one of the questions in which many students actually make a lot of errors when it comes to presentation. We will begin by first substituting r equals to 2. And when we substitute r equals to 2, what we find is that r minus 1 will be equals to 1, and r plus 1 will be equals to 3, and hence we will have 1 over 1 minus 1 over 3. This will be my case for r equals to 2. Now to get the next row, I am then going to do substitute r equals to 3, which will give me 1 over 2 minus 1 over 4. Moving on, to get the next row, I should substitute r equals to 4. But wait, does it seem like I cannot do any cancellation yet at this point in time? Indeed, it seems so, right? Do not worry, just continue writing one more row, and ta-da! We have the first cancellation that we can do. What is this? Observe that we now have a negative 1/3 plus 1/3. So 1/3 minus 1/3, this is going to cancel and give me 0. So this is the first part where I can start cancelling. What happens if I sub r equals to 5 then? I should be getting 1/4 minus 1/6, and just nice, this will cancel. Now, when I said just now that I want to bring out some points related to presentation, please note first of all that there must be a bracket around the entire block that you are using. Secondly, please remember that this is still a sum, so all these plus signs still have to be present. Okay, so moving on, we are going to complete our method of difference by writing in the last few rows. And basically, this is what we are going to get. Now there is a small error in the lecture notes here. This term should not be cancelled out. Okay, so please do not cancel this row. Observe here that I have chosen to write 3 rows. This is a good practice as it will allow us to ensure that we have done the cancellation properly. So how do I get my last 3 rows exactly? This is one point which confuses many students, so please pay attention as I go through how we are going to write down the last 3 terms. Now I know my last row will have a value of r equals to n, because my upper limit for this this summation is actually n over here, and therefore my last row must take on r equals to n. But this means that the row before that must have r equals to n minus 1, right? Because it is the term that is just before my last term. So the value of r should be n minus 1. And similarly, the term before that should have a value of r equals to n minus 2. Okay? Now comes the really tricky part in which we are going to do the cancellation. Now what can be cancelled here? Observe that this term over here is going to give me 1 over n minus 1. So this is going to cancel off with the term 2 rows below it. Okay? The cancellation is going to look like this. Similarly, this would have cancelled with the row just above this, and this would have cancelled with the previous row. So what terms am I going to have left here? From the top, let's scan through. This has not been cancelled, neither has this. And what about the next few terms? Observe that all the terms around here have all been cancelled, cancelled, all the way up till this one. This one is actually not cancelled. Remember I told you earlier that it was an error. And also, the final term has not been cancelled. So therefore, the terms that I'm going to have left would be 1 over 1 plus 1 over 2, which is going to give me 3 over 2, subtract negative 1 over n, and subtract negative 1 over n plus 1. So this would be my final answer. Okay, and that's it for example 8.